Recently on my feed, I came across a video by the user Spoctor entitled The Horrific Yandere Simulator Coding. I had never heard of Spoctor before, but from the looks of this video and quickly browsing a few of his others, he makes fairly entertaining content. He's one of those edgy YouTubers who wears a stupid mask and says fuck all the time. Not really my thing, but I'm old. Anyway, I watched this video and it did a pretty thorough job pissing me off due to the bullshit comp sci that he was spouting, and with a ton of confidence. Now, I have no interest in starting a beef with Spoctor. He might be an awesome, cool guy, but his video is bigger than him, and it's symptomatic of a problem with comp sci education. And this video has almost 800,000 views, so I felt like this really needed to be addressed by someone who's an ostensible professional like me.
Fortunately, it's not difficult at all to improve the code. Changing this to this only takes like 30 seconds. It's seriously not a big deal.
So the question I have for him is, why didn't he use it here, in this line of code, right? Look at this! This is it's organized by numerical values.
Spoctor spends about 10 minutes going on about how a switch statement is vastly superior to an if statement because it's faster for some reason. Doesn't explain why, he just says it's always faster and that you shouldn't use if statements. Now, I've heard similar sentiments from quote-unquote professionals for years, and it's just measurably untrue, and it's easy to prove. I wrote a code that uses if statements with equality comparisons, and then I decompiled it with the software ILSpy. As you can see, it gets turned into a switch statement. The same code exactly as the switch statement. So this will execute at the exact same speed as the switch statement. It's perfectly okay to prefer the switch statement if that's your thing, but that's a feelings argument, and speed is an empirical thing we can measure and look at. And there are reasons you shouldn't use switch statements. The reason switch statements are faster is because they don't mess with branch prediction. However, the way they get around this is by making you insert the break manually. It's surprisingly easy to forget to put that break and then have broken code. Also, people will occasionally try to get clever with the break statements. You end up getting code that's impossible to debug, but it's also ugly. Now, you can not like if statements, and that's fine. However, if statements are substantially less ambiguous than switch statements, and they're easier to approach. Generally, with a compiled programming language, the important part is making your intent clear. It's fun to jerk off at these little micro-optimizations, but if your intent is ambiguous, the compiler can't do auto-optimizations for you. Since if is clear what it's trying to do, it's easy for the compiler to use heuristics to figure out an optimal solution. Now, I agree that the Yandere simulator dude should have perhaps used a different thing than a big block of ifs, but not for performance reasons. Honestly, the thing that concerned me more than anything was the string comparisons in all the ifs and switches. String comparison is quite expensive, at least compared to integer comparison, and that was a lot of the time saying compare. You can memorize string comparison somewhat by memoizing a hash code, but you still end up iterating over every character almost every time. And even moving to the mythical switch statement won't really affect performance because that's not the bottleneck. Now, the way I would have handled this, and this might not be faster, but it would be easier to maintain, would be to use a hash map of lambda functions and dispatch based on that. This concept has been abstracted somewhat as a multi-method, very popular in the Clojure language, but it's also in other languages, and you can reinvent this with the hash map. And that would make it have roughly 2 string comparisons max, and usually 1. Spoctor spends almost no time addressing this concern, and instead decides to spend a rampant amount of time talking more about how horrible if statements are. He also went into detail about how stupid the A-star algorithm is, and this just shows a lack of understanding of fundamental computer science, and specifically about pathfinding algorithms. A-star is not a deprecated, horrible algorithm. It's the fastest one we have right now without using some elaborate neural network machine learning thing. Now, I agree that the Yandere Dev should not have used pathfinding on every frame for everything, but the easiest way to get around that would be to either have a counter with a horrible if statement or to break it into grid, which would be really hard to do. I don't want to simp for the Yandere simulator dude. I don't know him, I don't care about him, and it's not the point of this. The point of this is that there are a lot of people in the comp-sci industry that believe a lot of weird, stupid things about optimization and performance. It's harmful because people watch these kinds of videos, get these ideas about how to program, and masturbate over a microsecond saved because of using a switch statement, and don't focus on maintainability of the code.
Predicament here, and he's used the excuse that, oh, it's just code that executes once in one frame. It's just code that doesn't execute more than one frame. And to my response that I say, well, okay, that might be true, but here's the thing that's a very bad programming practice. You see, if you do not try to optimize every line of code, what is to say that you will get lazy with other code optimization?
So Spoctor here is just wrong. Any engineer will tell you that people who try to optimize every line of code are the most irritating assholes to work with. Code needs to be easy to read, not necessarily fast, and code that is impossible to read is impossible to optimize later. This is just showing naivete. I remember when I was in college briefly that I had the same mentality of trying to do stupid bit shifting stuff and weird little micro optimizations with the idea that my code might be a microsecond faster, but it wasn't, and I couldn't read the code later. Tools exist to find bottlenecks in the code, and if your code's easy to read, it's usually easier to fix those bottlenecks. Now, in fairness, Spoctor does mention the performance profiling tools, so I'll give him credit for that, but he still has a bad take on this. That's pretty much all I had to say about this. I'm kind of new to this YouTube thing. I just, wanted to put my opinion out there because I thought this was harmful shit and I should make it known that I disagree with it.